Hello, and welcome to TerraNash. I'm Aiden, your narrator for tonight. Let's take this time together to step away from the rush of the day and ease into a world of dreams and wonder. Find a comfortable place to sit or lie down, letting go of any tension as you settle in. Close your eyes and let your breathing slow. Inhale deeply and exhale gently, letting your body relax with each breath. With every exhale, feel yourself drift further into calmness. Tonight, I'll tell you a story, one of ancient rivers, forgotten lands, and a hidden civilization cradled by time itself. It's called the Valley of Riverian, and it begins not with a great journey, but with a quiet discovery, deep within the dusty shelves of a library. But before we begin, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you listening from tonight? Is it late where you are, with the moon high and the house asleep? Or perhaps it's still evening, and you're stealing a quiet moment for yourself before the day truly ends? Let us know in the comments. We love imagining the little pockets of stillness where our stories find you. And if there's a kind of tale you'd love to hear next, maybe a story about drifting clouds, or a hidden path through an enchanted garden, or even a cozy adventure with a sleepy hedgehog, tell us. Your ideas shape the stories we tell, and we'd love to weave them into future nights like this one. If you'd like to dive deeper into TerraNash, you can join us on Patreon for early access to all our stories and a special playlist to carry this calm with you. And if these bedtime stories have been a gentle pause in your nights, subscribing is the easiest way to support us. It means the world to us, and it helps us keep this space soft and sacred for dreamers like you. Now, let's take a slow, deep breath together and allow the world around you to soften, like mist curling through ancient trees. Feel the weight of the day gently melt away, replaced by the stillness of starlight and the gentle hush of flowing waters. The story is waiting. So close your eyes if you wish. Settle in and drift with me into the hidden wonders of the Valley of Riverian. Nerai Solen had always preferred the quiet corners of the library. While others found adventure in distant mountains or crowded cities, she found it between pages, weathered, forgotten, and softly humming with secrets. It was late afternoon when she wandered beyond the usual rows and into the restricted archives, a part of the town's old library that hadn't seen visitors in years. Dust motes danced in the fading golden light streaming through high windows as she ran her fingers along the spines of books untouched by time. Her fingers paused on a leather-bound volume. No title, no author, just a worn cover etched faintly with a river-like design. Curiosity tugged her in. She pulled the heavy book down and opened it with a gentle creak, revealing yellowed pages thick with the scent of age. Between two chapters, on lands that no longer existed, something fell out and fluttered to the floor. Nerai bent to retrieve it. It was a folded sheet of parchment, crinkled, water-damaged, but still intact. Her breath caught. It was a hand-drawn map. Symbols and landmarks sprawled across the parchment, labeled in an archaic dialect she recognized from her research into lost settlements. A series of winding lines suggested a valley, surrounded by cliffs and hidden beyond known geography. In one corner, she found a name scribbled in faded ink. Gregor Wynne, her grandfather. The same grandfather who had vanished decades ago during an expedition no one ever spoke of. Nerai's pulse quickened. She turned the map over and found a note written in the margins in her grandfather's handwriting. For the one who sees beyond the ink, Riverian lives. The word Riverian was unfamiliar, but it stirred something in her. A story she once heard. A myth of a hidden valley sustained by a living river. But myths didn't come with maps. She sat back, stunned, the hum of the library vanishing beneath a rush of thought. Her academic project on forgotten geographies suddenly felt like a breadcrumb trail laid just for her. This wasn't coincidence. It was an invitation. And perhaps, finally, a chance to understand the man who had disappeared before she was born. With the map tucked safely inside her notebook, Nerai left the archives with a strange weight in her chest. Half dread, half destiny. She didn't know what lay beyond the lines and symbols on the page, but she knew one thing for certain. Her world had just shifted, and whatever Riverian was, it was waiting. Nerai stood at the edge of the train platform, the distant hills of the southern continent rising like silent sentinels beyond the horizon. The map, carefully scanned, copied, and sealed inside her journal, was now her compass. She had spent days decoding its strange notations, cross-referencing old expedition logs, and emailing professors who dismissed the whole thing as legend. All but one name kept surfacing: Cairn Elwood. He was once a renowned explorer, known for mapping uncharted terrains and disappearing for months at a time with only a compass and a flask of tea. More importantly, he had been part of her grandfather, Gregor Wynne's last known expedition. After weeks of trying, Nerai finally reached him through an obscure message board for ex-cartographers. His reply was short. "If you found the map, we need to talk. Meet me in Veleth Port." Now, as the train rumbled into the coastal town, Nerai clutched her bag a little tighter. The port was a place of noise and wind, full of departing vessels and old sea legends. Cairn met her at a quiet cafe near the docks. He was older than she expected, with a weathered face like driftwood and eyes that looked through things rather than at them. He didn't greet her with small talk. Instead, he unfolded a crumpled map of his own and placed it beside hers. "You're not supposed to have this," he said, tapping the page. "Your grandfather swore me to secrecy." "I didn't go looking for it," Nerai replied. "It found me." Karen studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded once, as though deciding something unspoken. "He was right about Riverian, but we weren't ready for it. Not then." He showed her notes, some Gregor's, some his own, about strange magnetic fields, failing equipment, and the feeling of being watched by something unseen. They had reached the outer cliffs, but a sudden landslide cut their team off. Gregor insisted on going forward alone. He never came back. Now, armed with Nerai's map and a fire rekindled in his eyes, Cairn agreed to one more journey. They packed light, navigation gear, climbing tools, rations, and water filters. 2 others joined them. Tharlan, a quiet tracker with a knack for reading terrain, and Arlen, a young geologist eager for discovery. Their goal was to follow the map exactly, even through the mist-covered highlands no satellite could see. As they climbed toward the escarpment where Gregor once vanished, strange things began to happen. Their compasses spun aimlessly. GPS signals faded. Drones sent ahead never returned. The air grew heavy with moisture, and the light shifted in subtle, unnatural ways, as if they were slipping between layers of reality. Then, just as they neared the final ridge, a sudden storm broke. Wind howled with a voice that seemed almost human. Rain lashed at their gear as the ground trembled beneath them. A rock slide caught them mid-slope, forcing them to anchor quickly. Nerai lost her footing, and Cairn grabbed her just in time. They had no choice but to take shelter in a narrow crevice hidden behind a thicket of vines. When the storm passed, they emerged, only to find the world completely changed. Below them stretched a valley they hadn't seen before. It shimmered in soft greens and silvers, cloaked in mist, pulsing with the quiet rhythm of flowing water. Cairn stood in stunned silence. "It wasn't a myth," he whispered. "It was a veil." Nerai said nothing. She simply stared down at the hidden world that had been waiting for them, just beyond the edge of the known. They descended at dawn, the valley below still wrapped in a veil of silver mist. The terrain was nothing like the highlands they had climbed. The cliffs opened like the jaws of some ancient creature, revealing a steep, winding path covered in moss, wild orchids, and vines that glowed faintly in the dim morning light. Every step forward felt like stepping into a dream, one shaped not by the rules of nature, but by something older and more deliberate. The moment their boots touched the valley floor, the air changed. It was thicker, damp, and rich with scents that didn't exist outside. Earth and flowers, and something almost electrical, like the sharpness that lingers after lightning. Trees twisted upward in elegant spirals, their trunks marked with patterns that resembled writing. Rivers flowed without a sound, unnaturally clear and glowing softly beneath the surface. The group exchanged uncertain glances. It was beautiful, but it was too quiet. There were no birds, no wind rustling leaves, just the low hum of flowing water, as if the valley itself was breathing. Arlen attempted to take samples of the soil and the air, but his instruments began malfunctioning. Tharlan, normally stoic, admitted he felt like they were being watched. Cairn grew more withdrawn the deeper they went. His eyes constantly scanned the trees, the riverbanks, and the mist, as though expecting something or someone to appear. As for Nerai, the deeper they travelled, the stronger her dreams became. She began to see things in her sleep. A great temple carved into a mountainside, draped in flowering vines. A glowing city of glass and stone by the river's edge. And always the sound of a voice. Not one she recognized, but one that spoke her name with impossible gentleness. Nerai, come closer. One night, she woke with a start to find water running across the ground toward her like threads of liquid silk. It curled around her boots, then retreated, vanishing into the earth. The others saw nothing, but Cairn began looking at her with quiet suspicion after that. Then came the footprints. Not theirs. These were bare, small, and fresh, appearing just outside their camp in the morning dew. No tracks led to or away from them. Just a presence acknowledged, then gone. On the third day, they found the remains of a camp deep in the valley. Not ancient ruins, but recent. Coals still black in the fire pit, tools cleaned and tucked beneath a canopy of leaves. Whoever had been there, they had left in a hurry, or were watching from just beyond the mist. Nerai's journal grew filled with sketches, plants that shimmered when touched, stones etched with spiraling runes, water that sang in low tones when stirred. She could feel something within her awakening, something that whispered of familiarity. This place didn't feel foreign. It felt like something she had forgotten. As the group approached a bend in the river that split into 7 narrow channels, Nerai paused. The pattern looked familiar. She flipped through her grandfather's old journal and found a matching sketch. Gregor had drawn this exact river split, but the note beneath it chilled her. Only those who listen can follow the water's true path. What did he mean by that? She murmured. Cairn stepped beside her. It means the river chooses who finds the heart of the valley. They stood in silence, the mist swirling gently around their boots, and the river before them murmuring in a tongue that only the valley seemed to understand. Nerai didn't know what lay ahead, But in that moment, she no longer doubted one simple truth. Riverian was real, and it was watching. They followed the center stream, guided not by compass, but by intuition. Nerai's in particular. She couldn't explain it, but the river seemed to pulse with intention beneath her steps, like it knew she was listening. The air grew warmer as they walked, and the light took on a golden hue, filtered through canopies of translucent leaves that shimmered in colors not found in any known spectrum. Then the mist parted. Before them, nestled between the arms of the river, stood a village unlike anything Nerai had seen. Homes crafted from smooth stone and living wood, curved naturally from the earth, seamlessly merging with the land around them. Ribbons of water wound through the spaces like lifelines, and soft glowing lanterns floated gently in the air, bobbing as though breathing. It was a place alive in ways that defied reason, neither ancient nor futuristic, but both at once. Figures emerged from the trees with silent grace. They wore garments woven from leaf fiber and river thread, adorned with shells, polished stone, and living vines that moved subtly with their breath. Their skin bore patterns like flowing ink, shifting faintly beneath the surface. Their eyes shimmered like water at dusk, deep, watchful, and old. The leader stepped forward, a tall woman with silver black hair braided with river reeds. Her voice was soft, yet filled with command. "You have found what does not wish to be found," she said, her gaze locking with Nerai's. "And yet, it was you we waited for." The travelers were disarmed, but not harmed. The Riverians, as they called themselves, welcomed them not as enemies, but as something else. Puzzle pieces finally returned. Nerai's presence, they said, had stirred the Nyavir, the soul of the river that flowed through everything. Cairn was skeptical, but Nerai couldn't deny the pull she felt. The voice she'd heard in dreams was stronger now, louder, closer. They were shown to resting shelters that opened like flower petals at sunrise. Food was brought, fruits and roots that shimmered slightly when sliced, water that hummed when poured. The Riverians moved with a serenity that felt almost rehearsed, as if they danced with time instead of walking through it. That night, Nerai sat at the river's edge, dipping her fingers into the water. It responded, twisting upward like a silken ribbon, curling around her wrist without wetting her skin. It was alive, watching, recognizing. The elder woman returned, introducing herself as Maya. She spoke in riddles at first, then more directly as trust began to form. "You are of the river and of the world beyond. Your blood sings in both tongues," she said, gently brushing a hand over Nerai's brow. "You are not the first to come from the line of Gregor Wynn. He was one of us in the end." Nerai's breath caught. He lived here for many seasons until he vanished. Vanished? Maya's expression clouded. He chose a path few are brave enough to walk, one that does not always return, but his echoes remain. The others rested, but Nerai wandered. She found a carved archway at the village's edge, leading into a stone tunnel overgrown with vines. Inside were murals, intricate depictions of the river's creation, the birth of Riverian, and of a stranger arriving long ago. A man with a compass, eyes full of wonder, and a sketchbook tucked beneath his arm. In the final panel, the man was gone. In his place, a young woman stood at the river's center, her eyes closed, her hands open, light streaming from her chest. The woman looked like Nerai. She reached out to touch the mural. The wall was warm, pulsing faintly beneath her fingertips. Behind her, the river whispered once more, "You have returned." And Nerai, for the first time in her life, felt something inside her begin to awaken. The following days unfolded like pages in a living book. The Riverians continued their quiet hospitality, offering guidance without pressure, answers without urgency. Yet Nerai couldn't shake the feeling that something was being carefully withheld. Every time she asked directly about her grandfather, their expressions softened with a kind of reverence, but never clarity. It was as if they were guarding a truth too sacred or too dangerous to speak aloud. Cairn remained uneasy. Though he masked it behind his weathered calm, Nerai saw the tension in his shoulders. He often drifted away from the village, scouting on his own, watching the river like it might turn on them. One evening, he returned with a discovery. Half hidden behind a curtain of flowering vines at the base of a rock wall was a narrow entrance, nearly swallowed by the land. Inside, Nerai found what she hadn't dared to hope for. A small chamber carved into the stone, lit only by the phosphorescent roots weaving through its walls. On a raised stone shelf sat a few weather-worn objects, an old compass with a cracked lens, a silver pocket knife dulled with time, and a leather-bound journal that sent a tremor through Nerai's chest. She reached for it with trembling hands. The initials on the cover, G.W. She opened it carefully. The ink had faded, the pages curled with age and damp, but the writing was still legible. Her grandfather's handwriting. Notes about the journey here. Observations on the river's sentience. Sketches of plants, of Riverian dwellings, and of the Nyvir's pool, an inland spring that glowed from within. There were philosophical reflections too, deeper and more troubled toward the end. Gregor had become enraptured by the river's intelligence, calling it a living mind that remembers. He wrote of dreams shared with water, of voices in his sleep, of visions that blurred memory and prophecy. But then the tone shifted. The last entries became cryptic, mentions of division within the Riverian elders. A name repeated several times. Malis. Warnings. The Nyavir must not be broken. He seeks to divide what must remain whole. The final entry was a scrawled note. If Nerai ever finds this, I am sorry. Follow the current, not the voice. The river will test her too. Nerai stared at the page until her vision blurred. Her name, written long before she was even born. Cairn stood nearby, his face pale in the glow. He knew you'd come, he whispered. Before they left the chamber, Nerai tucked the journal safely inside her pack. As they stepped back into the open air, Maya was waiting for them. You found his place, she said softly, her voice more shadow than sound. Then it is time you knew more. She led them deeper into the valley, past the outer rings of the Riverian village, and into what the Riverians called the Inner Grove, a sacred space where outsiders were never brought. There stood a single tree taller than any Nerai had seen, with roots that plunged into the river and branches that shimmered with droplets of pure light. Beneath it lay a circle of stones, carved with names in a language that seemed to move if stared at too long. Maya gestured to a stone at the center. Gregor Wynn, guardian of the flow. He died here, Nerai asked. Maya shook her head. He passed, but not in the way you understand. His spirit moved into the current. He chose to become part of the Nyavir, to protect it from what was coming. What was coming? Cairn asked, voice low. Maya hesitated. Then, with visible pain, she spoke the name. Milas Vox. Nerai's heart sank, the name from the journal. She turned toward Maya. Who is he? Maya looked toward the glowing tree. He was one of us. Once. But he believed the river's gift was something to wield, not to revere. He left before your grandfather arrived, but we fear he never truly let go of this place. As night fell, Nerai sat alone beneath the roots of the great tree, the journal in her lap, the river's quiet hum cradling her thoughts. Gregor had left her a trail, not just of ink and sketches, but of warnings and hope. He had seen a future where she would find this place. And now, standing in his shadow, surrounded by beauty and mystery and unease, Nerai knew her journey was no longer one of discovery. It was one of inheritance. The Navir's pool was not marked on any of the Riverians' maps. It existed somewhere between belief and reality, spoken of in hushed tones and sacred metaphors. Maya explained that it was a place of testing and remembrance, where the spirit of the river revealed not just the truth of one's past, but the shape of their soul. It called only to those it recognized, and it had begun to call Nerai by name. They set out at first light, guided by Maya and two silent Riverian elders. The journey led them far beyond the familiar village paths, through luminous groves and high ridges where the wind whispered in tongues that Nerai could almost understand. The others stayed behind, Cairn reluctant but silent, Tharlan and Arlen uneasy. Nerai herself was filled with quiet dread, not of what she might find, but of what might already know her. The pool revealed itself not suddenly, but like a secret unfolding. Nestled in a clearing surrounded by stone pillars covered in slowly shifting glyphs, the water was perfectly still, glowing with soft blue-green light from within. No ripples, no sound. The elders stopped at the edge, and Maya turned to Nerai. "You must go alone," she said. "The river waits for you, child of two worlds." Nerai stepped forward and knelt at the pool's edge. She gazed into the water, expecting to see her reflection. But the surface remained blank, as if it refused to mirror her form. Only when she touched the water with her fingertips did it shimmer and shift, then opened. Images bloomed across the surface like ink spreading in water. Her mother, much younger, standing at the same pool, tears in her eyes. Her grandfather Gregor, holding a small carved talisman that pulsed with light. Then herself, floating through time and memory, her life flickering like candlelight, moments she remembered and moments she had never lived. Then the images grew deeper. The pool showed her two halves, one rooted in the world above, grounded in academia, logic, and loss. The other was fluid, ancient, tied to the river, with memories that were not her own. A child watching fireflies beside the great tree, a voice echoing through the current, a lullaby sung in the Riverian tongue. Then the vision shifted. She saw Gregor arguing with a man, tall, sharp-featured, eyes like shattered mirrors. Milis Vox. He held a shard of glowing crystal, demanding something. Gregor stood firm. The scene twisted violently. There was a flash of light, and Gregor fell into the river. But his body never sank. Instead, the water rose to meet him, wrapping around him like a shroud. He vanished within the current. And finally, Nerai saw herself, standing at the center of the river, her arms open, the Naivia swirling around her. She was both herself and something more, radiant and terrifying, as if the river had chosen her not just to witness, but to become part of its story. She gasped and pulled back, water dripping from her hands, but not her face. The elders waited, unreadable. Maya stepped forward and helped her to her feet. "You've seen," she whispered. Nerai nodded slowly. "My mother, she came from here." "Yes," Maya said. "She loved your father, but feared what would happen if the outside world discovered Riverian. She left, carrying you. We believed the bloodline would fade, but it only grew stronger. Nerai looked back at the still pool. The river remembers. It always does. They returned to the village in silence, but word of Nerai's visit spread quickly. Some Riverians welcomed her with joy, calling her Selira Vai, the river-born child. Others kept their distance, uncertain of what her awakening might mean. Cairn met her outside the shelter that night, watching the river in thought. "You saw him, didn't you?" "I saw more than him," she replied. "I saw everything, and I think he knew all along that I would." Cairn looked away, guilt flickering in his expression. "I should have gone with him back then. Maybe I could have stopped." "No," Nerai interrupted softly. "He made his choice, and now I have mine." But even as she spoke, a new presence stirred in her thoughts. A shadow rippling beneath the current, distant but drawing closer. Mylis Vox had not forgotten Riverian, and he was coming. The days that followed were strangely quiet. The valley's rhythms continued as before, water flowing, leaves whispering, the Riverians going about their rituals. But beneath it all was a tension Nerai couldn't shake. She felt the eyes of the elders on her more often now, their gazes both proud and wary. Word had spread of her vision at the Nyvir's pool, and while some regarded her as a kind of prophesied return, others spoke in hushed tones of disruption, of old wounds stirring with her arrival. Then one morning, the silence broke. Cairn was missing. Nerai and Tharlan searched through the outskirts of the village, following a faint trail through the mossy ground. It led beyond the woven arches of the Riverian grove and into the far cliffs, where the mist grew thick and cold. There, deep in the canyon's shadow, they found him. Cairn stood before a tall, dark figure cloaked in expedition gear, a satchel slung over one shoulder, his hands empty, but his stance confident. Mylis Vox. He looked older than in the vision Nerai had seen. Grey now streaked his hair, and his face had the worn precision of someone who'd spent too many years plotting in silence. But his eyes hadn't changed. They gleamed with ambition, cold and sharp. "Nerai Solen," he said, as if greeting a character from a story he'd once heard. "You're even earlier than I expected." Nerai moved to stand beside Cairn, who said nothing, his jaw clenched. She stared at Mylis, voice steady. "How did you find us?" "Gregor's journal wasn't the only one," Mylis replied. "Your grandfather wrote many things over the years, and he wasn't the only one who left Riverian with secrets." He opened his satchel and pulled out a worn, leather-bound book, another journal. Cairn looked down, shame flickering in his expression. "I made copies," he admitted quietly. "A long time ago. I thought if Gregor didn't come back, the world deserved to know." Mylis gave a humorless smile. "And now The world will. Riverian's energy, its essence, is the solution to the global crisis. You've seen the crystals, the water, the bioluminescence. This isn't just beauty, it's power. It's life, Nerai said. It's not meant to be harvested. And yet it can be, Malus replied smoothly. Your grandfather didn't understand that. But you're part of this place. You can unlock it. She stepped back, shaking her head. You want to drain a living river. I want to save the outside world before it drowns in its own decay. Miley stepped closer. Think of what you could do. One vial of Navia's current could power a city block for months. Your name would be remembered. You could do more than preserve this place. You could make it matter. Behind them, the air shifted. Maya and 2 Riverian guardians appeared silently from the trees. Malus glanced at them without concern. You can try to stop me, he said, voice calm. But I have a team waiting at the cliffs. They're coming with the equipment we need to extract the heart of Nivea. Whether you help or not, this is happening. Kayan turned to Nerai, his voice low. He's not lying. They're already setting up camp beyond the ridge. I saw them before he approached me. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, betrayal flaring in her chest. Because I wasn't sure. Until now, he said. But I am now. Malus looked at her one last time. I'll find the heart, Nerai. But I'd prefer not to break the valley to do it. You and I, we could open the river together. Then he was gone, vanishing back into the mist as silently as he had arrived. That night, Riverian did not sleep. The elders gathered, and for the first time, panic stirred beneath their measured tones. The heart of Nivea, source of the river's memory, its balance, was hidden, buried deep beneath the central flow. It had not been touched in generations. Nerai stood at the temple's edge, watching the river's glow pulse softly, as if in warning. She felt the current shifting beneath her skin, restless and afraid. The valley was no longer just a sanctuary. It was a battleground, and she was at the center of it. She turned to Maya. If he finds the heart, Maya's voice was quiet. Then Riverian will bleed. Nerai looked out over the waters, the reflection of the stars trembling across its surface, and knew she had a choice to make. Her inheritance was no longer just knowledge or memory. It was responsibility. And time was running out. They came at dawn. The fog had barely lifted from the valley when the first low hum of machinery echoed through the cliffs. Nerai awoke to the sound of startled birds and the distant grind of steel against stone. From the high ridge, she could already see the outlines of unfamiliar figures. Malus's team, outfitted in expedition gear and protective suits, rolling equipment on thick treads toward the river's heart. They moved with clinical efficiency, as though the valley were merely another obstacle to be mapped, mined, and stored away. Maya summoned the council immediately. The Riverians gathered in the central grove, their serene expressions now shadowed by fear. This was not the arrival of curious outsiders. It was the beginning of an invasion. Elders argued in hushed tones whether to confront the intruders or retreat to the deeper forest sanctuaries. But Nerai stepped forward before the debate could spiral. "We can't run," she said. "If they reach the heart of Naevia, it won't just poison the river. It will unravel everything." Cairn stood beside her, the guilt in his eyes replaced now with resolve. "I'll go with her," he said. "I know the paths Melis is likely to take. If we act fast, we might reach it first." Arlen and Thalen volunteered to stay behind and help guard the village. Maya, after a long pause, handed Nerai a talisman carved from riverstone. "This will show you the final path," she said. "But be warned. Once opened, the river does not forget." They set out through the narrow paths carved beneath the valley's roots, tunnels shaped by water and time. The deeper they went, the more alive the river felt, its pulse stronger, its light brighter. When they finally emerged into the cavern beneath the central waterfall, they found it. The heart of Naevia. Suspended in a cradle of living stone, it was a crystalline sphere the size of a lantern, glowing with a soft, rhythmic pulse that mirrored Nerai's own heartbeat. Threads of water rose to it and curved away like veins. It was not just the river's source. It was its memory, its consciousness, its soul. Nerai approached slowly, reverently, the talisman in her palm vibrating faintly. She reached out, but the cavern shuddered as a voice rang out. "Don't." Melis stood at the entrance, flanked by two of his engineers. His expression was no longer composed. It was desperate. "If you remove it now, everything will collapse. The river will lash out." "You already tried to extract it," Nerai said. "You fractured its shell." "I did what had to be done," Melis snapped. "But I didn't expect it to react so violently." All at once, the glow of the heart flickered, and the entire cavern trembled. The waters above and below surged. The song of the Naevia, once calm and deep, had turned into a roar. "You damaged it," Cairn growled. "You broke the balance." "I can stabilize it," Melis insisted. "With your help, Nerai, you can command it. You're the only one it listens to." The water surged up from the ground, forming a wall between them. Nerai felt it pressing against her mind, not like an invasion, but a plea. Pain, confusion. It was hurting. She looked at Melis. "It doesn't need control. It needs healing." "Then give it what it wants," he shouted. "Give it you." In that moment, Nerai understood. She wasn't meant to take the heart or protect it like a relic. She was meant to complete it. She stepped forward, holding out the talisman. The water wrapped around her gently, pulling her toward the crystal. Cairn shouted her name, but it was already happening. The light engulfed her. In her mind's eye, She was standing within the river, not water, but memory itself. She saw the birth of Riverian, the early ancestors carving their homes into the land, the forming of the Navier not as a god, but a mirror of their harmony. She saw her grandfather's final moments, his decision to join with the river rather than let Mylis find the heart. And she saw herself, always part of this thread. The heart welcomed her, not as a sacrifice, but as kin. When the light faded, Nerai was still standing, but changed. The river flowed around her like a second skin, its glow pulsing through her veins. She turned to Mylis, who stepped back in stunned disbelief. "You don't control the Navier," she said. "You become one with it, or you lose everything." Mylis's team fled. He remained frozen, unmoving, until Cairn took his arm and led him away in silence. As the river calmed, the glow spread through the walls of the cavern and upward into the valley. The balance was returning. The wound was mending. Nerai fell to her knees, exhausted, her body still humming with the river's echo. Cairn knelt beside her. "You're one of them now," he whispered. She shook her head faintly. "I always was." Nerai awoke beneath the shade of the great tree in the inner grove, her body resting on a bed of woven moss and glowing petals. The world felt distant and close all at once, like she was both inside herself and part of something much larger. Every breath she drew echoed with the pulse of the Navier, as if the river now flowed through her bones. Around her, the air shimmered softly, and Riverians gathered in silence, not out of fear, but reverence. Maya was the first to speak. "She has returned not as a seeker, but as the Riverborn." Whispers spread like wind among the leaves. Nerai sat up slowly, the golden light of the morning catching on the thin traces of water that still curled along her skin like silver veins. The world sounded different now. She could hear the movement of roots beneath the earth, the quiet songs of stones, the river murmuring in a language only she understood. Cairn stood nearby, arms crossed, a small smile breaking through the usual furrow in his brow. "You scared me," he said. "But I've never seen anything like that." Nerai nodded, memories swirling within her, some hers, some the river's. "I didn't know what would happen, only that I had to answer it." Later that day, the council gathered once more beneath the great tree. The heart of Navier had stabilized, its glow now spread throughout the waterways of the valley, stronger than it had been in generations. Maya and the elders acknowledged that Nerai's transformation marked the return of the guardian line, the bloodline that had always been tied to the river's spirit and balance. What had been legend was now living again. But with the return came responsibility. Nerai stood before the council and addressed the deeper truth that had begun to take shape. "Riverian was never meant to remain hidden forever," she said. "But if we open our borders, It must be with purpose, not to be consumed, but to teach. Maya nodded solemnly. The outside world has changed since the last breach. If we are to engage, we must do so on our terms. Cairn volunteered to serve as the first bridge between Riverian and the outside. He would travel back beyond the cliffs, not to deliver secrets, but to offer dialogue, to find those in the world above who could respect what Riverian represented. He left with Nerai's blessing and a stone etched with the Navir's crest, a token of peace and intent. Mayalis, once a looming shadow, remained in Riverian's custody, not imprisoned, but watched, offered a chance to unlearn what he thought he knew. For now, he sat by the river in silence, never quite meeting Nerai's gaze. Weeks passed, and Riverian thrived. The river sang again, the trees bloomed with radiant light. Children ran barefoot through the groves, and stories returned to their rightful place in the circle of life. One evening, Nerai stood at the pool of Nivir, her reflection no longer silent. She saw herself clearly now, not just a scholar or a wanderer, not just Gregor Wynn's granddaughter, but a vessel of memory and choice. She reached into the water, and it welcomed her like an old friend. The Naivir whispered to her, its voice now one with her own. You are not the end of the river. You are the turning. And so, she walked through the grove, not as a visitor, but as the guardian she was born to be. Where the river once carried only silence, it now carried her name, woven into the current, the roots, the rain. Nerai Solen, riverborn, the voice of Riverian's future. Years passed like ripples in a stream, each one widening the reach of Riverian's story. The once hidden valley was no longer a myth, but a whispered truth, shared only among those who came in peace. It did not open its gates wide to the world, nor did it vanish again into legend. Instead, it became something rarer, a bridge, a place that offered knowledge and renewal, but only to those who listened first and spoke second. Nerai Solen stood at the stone balcony of the river embassy, a structure shaped from living wood and river stone that overlooked the cascading terraces of Riverian. Below her, guests from the outer world walked quietly among Riverians, scientists, healers, and artists chosen not by credentials, but by character. They came not to take, but to learn. And Riverian, in turn, began to remember its voice in the larger world. The embassy served as a sanctuary and a school. Here, elders taught about symbiotic farming, language through water patterns, and medicine drawn from song-blooming plants. No cameras were allowed, no recordings made. Every visitor left with only what they could carry in memory and story. Cairn Elwood became the first true ambassador. dividing his time between the mountain outposts and the valley, always carrying the weight of both regret and redemption. His weathered face softened with the passing years, and children gathered around him as he told tales of ancient maps and mist-covered paths. He never claimed to be a hero, only a man lucky enough to find his way back. Mylis Vox remained in Riverian longer than any expected. At first, he resisted, silent and stiff, the edge of ambition still lingering in his eyes. But slowly, something softened. He began tending the crystal gardens, studying the flow of Navir not as a resource, but as a living language. Whether it was guilt or awe that changed him, none could say. In time, he too became a voice of caution for those tempted by conquest. Maya, now revered as the Grand Elder, continued her gentle guidance of Riverian. Her wisdom deepened by time and the faith she had placed in Nerai. And as for Nerai herself, she had become more than a guardian. She was a symbol. Her presence was felt in every current of the river, in every root that touched the water, in the shimmer of moonlight on the Nyavir's surface. She no longer aged as she once had. The bond with the river had slowed her path through time. Some said she had become part spirit, a being of both breath and water. But she never claimed divinity. She still laughed with children, still stood quietly at the edge of ceremonies, still walked the outer trails when the stars were bright and the wind was curious. One evening, she returned to the old mural chamber, now restored and expanded. A second mural had been added beside the image of Gregor Wynn, this one of Nerai, standing at the heart of Navir, arms open, light rising from her chest. Between them, the river flowed in painted motion, a continuum of legacy. She reached out and touched her grandfather's face in stone. "You were right," she whispered. "It had to begin again." As the sun dipped beyond the cliffs, casting the valley in golden hues, the river sang its song of memory. And across the continent, deep beneath another forgotten forest, a second current stirred. A twin flow, once dormant, now humming to life. A new path opening, a new voice awakening. But for now, in the Valley of Riverian, peace flowed like water, and the world turned gently, remembering what it once was and what it could still become.